after parenting this complex kiddo for a good 9-10 years and starting to realize, wow, there's a real lack of optimistic, strength-based resources for parents like me. I love when I'm hanging out with this group and this young adult says to me, you know, I'm going to just go back to my room. My social battery is completely full right now. Our kids are not broken. They are exactly who they are meant to be. It's not how to get your child to do X, Y, or Z, or how to fix your child. It's how to be the parent your child needs.
Welcome back to another episode of the Unspoken Words Podcast, a Selective Mutism podcast by the Smart Center, produced and published by New Edition Productions. This episode, our first episode of 2026, features a discussion between Dr. Elisa Shipon-Blum and Debbie Reber on raising neurodivergent kids and the critical connection between autism, neurodivergence, and selective mutism. Debbie Reber is a parenting activist, best-selling author, and founder of the popular Tilt Parenting podcast, a top resource for parents raising neurodivergent children. Since 2016, she has championed a strengths-based approach that reframes how society supports kids who are wired differently. Her book, Differently Wired, is widely recommended by professionals, and her Full Tilt Parenting podcast has over 9 million downloads. She's a certified life coach and positive discipline trainer. Debbie has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and News Nation. In this episode of Unspoken Words, Dr. E and Debbie explore why selective mutism is often overlooked in neurodivergent children and how it co-occurs with autism, ADHD, and anxiety disorders. And of course, they share practical strategies grounded in both Debbie's strengths-based Tilt parenting philosophy and Dr. E's evidence-based SCAT framework. Before we get started, if you have any questions on anything you hear in today's episode, make sure to head to selectivemutismcenter.org/ask Dr. E. That's ASKDRE. And for the best of this episode and every episode of Unspoken Words, make sure to follow the podcast on Instagram and YouTube. We are at Unspoken Words_podcast over on Instagram and Unspoken Words Podcast by Dr. E on YouTube. All right, without further ado, please enjoy this latest episode of the Unspoken Words Podcast.
Hi, everyone. It's Dr. E. Before we get started with today's episode, I'm so excited to announce that our popular Selective Mutism in the School virtual conference is now available as a self-paced online course. The conference dives into how to assess the mute child, testing for common comorbidities, and proven strategies and interventions to support students with SM within the school. And of course, we dive into accommodations and interventions such as 504s and IEPs. The course offers 5.5 continuing education credits from most professionals, so parents, share this opportunity with your child's school. To sign up, just head to our website or check the description in this podcast episode. Together, we can create a world where every child has a voice. Now, enjoy the episode. Hello, good morning, listeners. I am excited, as I always am, to do these podcasts. And today we have Debbie. And Debbie, we would love to be able to chat with you today. And we're super excited about parenting. And we're going to talk about neurodivergence. So, hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you.
Oh, we are thrilled to have you. Tell us, how did you get into this with the neurodivergence and parenting and so forth?
Yeah, I always like to say this was not part of my kind of grand career scheme. And I'm also someone who's had many different iterations of careers in my life. But the most recent one before I pivoted was I used to write books for teenage girls, and I would speak at girls' organizations and conferences. And then I became a parent, and I did not become a parent to a teen girl. I became a parent to a very complicated little human who, within a couple of years, really, we started to realize this kid is moving through the world differently than what we expected, than what might be considered quote unquote typical. I'm using air quotes. And so I'm someone who has always been really good at researching and synthesizing information and applying it and then sharing it out with others. And that's what I've done in all of my different careers. And so I just realized, after parenting this complex kiddo for a good 9-10 years and starting to realize, wow, there's a real lack of optimistic, strength-based resources for parents like me. This was, this was 15 years ago. I was thinking, gosh, I really want to create something for other parents like me, because I knew that I wasn't alone. And I found that what existed was really it just didn't feel good and it wasn't helpful. And it was just hard to get access to information.
Wow. I feel like I'm glad this is being taped because I feel like I could transpose myself and my background and my situation to what you just said, because that's exactly my story with SM.
Yeah.
And it was my way, like you. I researched. There was so little out there, and what was out there just made me feel ugh.
Yeah.
And
Ugh.
it's still struggling. It's still a struggle out there for people to understand our kids. And, one size fits all does not work for anyone, frankly, but it's a recipe for every individual. But yeah, my background is basically identical to yours. And it's interesting how we navigate the world, right? And all because we were a mommy.
Yeah, and we create, there are some of us like you and me who we create what we need, what we would have needed. And so, it's really gratifying to see how things have changed in the 10 years since I launched Tilt Parenting within this neurodivergent space. But that's just always been what's drived me. Like, oh, I need this. I'm going to make it for the next person.
No, that's great. Well, one of the reasons we wanted to connect with you is although many children with selective mutism, social communication, anxiety disorder don't struggle with neurodivergence. However, we have many that do. And for the listeners out there who are the typical stuff isn't working or their child, like you said, navigating the world a bit different, and many are saying it's because of this, it's because of this. I want everyone to step back, have an open mind, and really think that maybe there's something else going on. One of the biggest things for us is why. Why does your child have a social communication challenge? Not treat to speak, because that just does not work for the far majority. And once we have that understanding, then we're able to develop an appropriate treatment plan and school-based accommodations interventions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's always underlying reasons. I mean, that's a big message and something that I continue to learn and share with parents is we're, our kids and we are so much more than our external symptoms or
Yep.
the way certain lagging skills, as Dr. Ross Green would say, are showing up in external behaviors.
No, for sure. So let's talk about neurodivergence. Like, would you give us, in your definition to our listeners, and most of our listeners are parents. Sometimes we get many professionals listening, educators listen, and those that are struggling with this listen. How would you describe neurodivergence?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm just going to actually take a step back and say when I launched Tilt, I used the language of differently wired because neurodivergence as a term wasn't even available. So
Yeah.
neurodiversity was available and that was really associated with autism. And so over the past, half a decade, the term neurodivergence has really come into, being used everywhere around the world, which is really exciting. And the way that I define it is, you know, unfortunately, it's putting up against this idea of normal, and we know there is no such thing as a normal brain or a typical way of being. But neurodivergence is someone who's wired differently by having some sort of neurodevelopmental difference. So that could be ADHD, it could be autism, it could be being gifted, it could be a learning disability, which it includes so many things: processing differences, auditory processing differences, sensory processing issues, or it could be a combination of all of those or bits and pieces here and there, right? So there's a lot of co-occurrence of these things, but it's basically someone whose neurodevelopmental wiring means that they struggle in certain environments because of sensory information or social challenges or these lagging skills.
I love how you described it. And I would say that the average family that comes to the Smart Center, the typical treat to speak just didn't work. And they still struggle. The child may have become quietly verbal, but they're not initiative. They're not elaborative. They can't figure out the social puzzle well. They get very anxious trying to integrate with others because they either can't pay attention, they can't process what was said, they get overwhelmed. They just can't figure out the social nuances. And so for many of the families we see, when we dive deep down, we see these other things. Now, it could just be sensory issues. I shouldn't say just sensory, but we have a lot of the majority, I would say, are highly sensitive individuals.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, and this is just an FYI for listeners, but also maybe this is new to you in the sense that the typical definition of a selectively mute individual is a very shy child. Well, guess what? When they're not as shy, you need to say, whoa, what else is going on that child or teen or adult is struggling with social communication, which is why I am so passionate and just like to my dying day, SM is a social communication challenge, and anxiety obviously is part of it, but it's not just anxiety, because the
Yeah.
anxiety is coming from somewhere. It's
Correct.
coming from somewhere, and it's
Yeah.
not just treat lower anxiety, give them meds and hope for the best. It's you need to understand. So it's assess to understand.
Yeah.
And then you develop that treatment. And you're right. Like, we have so many individuals that come to us. You need to understand their academics, starting, completing tasks. You know, the ADHD is there and you see it, and they can't hold conversations back and forth. We
Mhm.
see autism way more than people realize, and they just don't get that social puzzle. They don't even look anxious in certain situations. They
Yeah.
just don't integrate well. They get overwhelmed with just the thought of it. And it's not because of the social anxiety. So I love that we're talking about this, and processing is such a big part too for many, because they can't process the conversations. So they shut
Right.
down
Yeah.
and they can't keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
So what would you say the traditional parenting models and how that just doesn't work for individuals with neurodivergence?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of different camps, right? There's the more behaviorist model where we're treating the external behaviors and we're focused on the way that dysregulation shows up. And for a lot of neurodivergent kids, it shows up in ways that may be seen as inappropriate. It might be really intense behavior. It might be, I'm thinking of, again, Dr. Ross Green's book, The Explosive Child.
I
That
love
might be
that
a
book.
sign. Yeah, it's amazing. Game changer. And so that could be one way. Could be kids who seem like they are unmotivated or lazy or non-compliant, all of these things. And so in the one camp, you have, and this is unfortunately the way a lot of school systems and a lot of models approach working with kids like this is to try to focus on those behaviors using point systems, using behavioral plans and things like that. And then on the other side, what I believe for everyone I've talked with and what I've experienced kind of the best practices is focusing on getting curious about what the underlying issues are, paying attention to nervous system, what is going on with this kid. I'm a really big fan of Dr. Mona Delahook's work, and she wrote a wonderful book called Brain Body Parenting, where she's kind of tying together polyvagal theory and what's happening with our kids' nervous systems. And so it's a complete shift in how we parent or show up for a dysregulated child, and dysregulated because of their neurodivergence, right? And it means really getting curious about what is going on with this kid's nervous system. What do they need to feel safe right now, and how can we support them in learning the skills or solving the problems that they are struggling with, so that they can feel more regulated, and then they'll be more open to learning and growing, right? So it's a big difference, and there's still a big chasm there. And again, unfortunately, a lot of schools and more traditional systems are still kind of stuck in this behavioral approach. They're only looking at the tip of the iceberg and not everything going on underneath.
No, I love that. And it reminds me of the look, listen, and learn. I tell parents, look, listen, and learn. When your child is dysregulated, when your child is really frustrated, and your child is like, just seems super uncomfortable, what is going on? What preceded that?
Yeah.
What are those symptoms? It's not just do this, give them a sticker chart. It's the look, listen, and learn. And you'll start to see these patterns. What are the biggest misconceptions with neurodivergence?
I mean, I think because these kids are so complex and zigzagged, right? Their profile, they have this real vastly asynchronous development. So you might have kids who are like cognitively this, at this place, but social emotionally they're down here. And, they just seem to fluctuate so much and it can be really perplexing. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that our kids could do better, or they were able to do this last week, so this must be a choice, right? And so I think we tend to either, I'm thinking of the word adultizing. I don't know if that's the right word, but we tend to look at our kids as if they should be more capable than they are, or we're doing all the things right that we've read in a book or whatever, and we're not getting the results we wanted, so we put it on the kids. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges is really how do we meet this child where they are, and not kind of put our own perspective into them making a choice about something. And I don't know if this answers your question because my brain is going in like 3 different directions, but I will just say that one of the biggest challenges for parents, and you probably see this in your community, is just the lack of understanding from other people who aren't raising kids like this. And so we can, as parents, really doubt ourselves. And when we doubt ourselves and we think we're not doing this right, we're failing as a parent, we might default to some of these more behaviorist approaches. And that can just escalate conflict and just kind of get us stuck in this cycle where everybody kind of feels bad, right? The family dynamic really starts to suffer from that.
Wow. I feel like I'm trying to jot down notes as you're talking. And I'm like, we could do a podcast just on those kind of 3 kind of topics you just brought up, which I'm very similar to you. My mind goes a mile a minute. And
that's why we created our own like communities, right?
Yeah, it's like a mile a minute. I'm thinking of so many things. Number one, meeting them where they're at. My patients, my clients, the families we work with, they know I say that all the time. We need to meet these kids where they're at. You can't be too far ahead, because if you're too far ahead, you're applying pressure, and that will shut your kid down and cause them to become incredibly uncomfortable and avoidant to you and your ways. And then if you don't do enough and you're not supportive in a way that helps them feel confident, connected, and capable, then they become learned helplessness victims. So it's this balance and knowing how to meet them. And that's where working with a clinician that can help guide you and help you really understand how to meet them and teach you how to meet them where they're at. Number one. Number two, choice. Like, you're right. We hear so much. I have something called the Selective Mutism School Evaluation Form, and it's a form to collect data from teachers, academics, their social communication with peers, with teachers, small and large groups. And I can't tell you how often we read this and see choice. She's choosing, she's refusing. And even parents will sometimes say, my child is refusing to do this. They're choosing that. And it's really frustrating. So what you're projecting onto those children, right, Debbie, is your frustration with them. And how do they then how do these sensitive individuals interpret that? They go within themselves. They feel abandoned. They feel alone. They feel anxious.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you look at, the IEP language, it's all based on deficits. It's all based on, this kind of projection, as you said, about what a child should be able to do and what we think is appropriate for any situation, right? I'm thinking of Dr. Barry Prezant's work. He wrote this wonderful book called Uniquely Human, which is about autism. It was really one of the first books that I know of that really kind of changed the way we looked at autistic behavior as not something that's maladaptive or needs to be fixed, but rather this stimming or whatever it is actually a self-regulation strategy that the autistic person is engaging in. And I think that we have to start looking at, again, the underlying reasons why is this child doing this, and how can we support them so they can not feel bad about themselves for being who they are, while also helping them with agency feel better in their skin, in their daily experience, so that they can thrive, right? So that they don't have to mask, or they don't have to feel like they're failing, right? And is it okay if I go back to something you said earlier?
No, for sure.
Yeah, I was just thinking, going back to that question, and you spoke to this a bit about what are some of the myths. I think one of the biggest myths is that we think, even when we're on it and we understand what's going on with this child, we still feel like okay, now I know what's going on. If I do X, Y, and Z, we can fix this problem or solve this problem. And we have a timeline in mind for when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we are sometimes kind of putting this not arbitrary, but this single approach on a unique individual. So just to reiterate what you said, showing up for the child that we have, parenting the child we have, continuing to lean in and getting curious about who they are, and always challenging our own agendas and expectations for what the timeline is and what it should look like and what the end goal is so important, especially as our kids get older.
No, those are great points. I mean, thank you for elaborating on that, because I think that people get caught up in these kind of thought processes too, of, like you said, what it should be in the timeline. It's like a family that says, well, how long is this going to take?
Yeah.
And that's such a loaded question. It's like, I wish I could tell you exactly. I can tell you if if you implement these recommendations, you're going to see steady progress for sure.
Yes.
And many of our clients, our patients, can absolutely overcome selective mutism. But if an individual has ADHD, if an individual is on the autism spectrum, if the individual has a learning difference, we can help them reach their capacity, but we can't cure that.
Yeah, and it's nothing to be cured, right? It is.
Right.
It's just just a neuro difference. But yes, an autistic person will always be autistic. An ADHD person will always have ADHD. But what they can do is learn how to kind of understand who they are and what they need to create a life that is meaningful to them. And that, to me, is always the goal.
And when I said cure, I was trying to do like little
Yeah.
because the asterisks, like cure, it's hard. I mean, I've had patients where the family, like the individual's like 16 chronologically, but functioning much younger, intellectual disability and so forth. And they'll look at me and go, you can fix that. And they use the word fix and cure. And I think it's about understanding the capacity and helping them reach their capacity and providing the tools to the individual, but also to the parents and the teachers and aunts and uncles and so forth. And it's empowering for individual kids that get older and they figure this out and they realize why this is hard for them. It is almost validating, right? Talk about that.
1,000%. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I something that comes up a lot in my community are parents who are reluctant to sharing maybe a new diagnosis with their child because they don't want them to feel bad about themselves or have that stigma. And our kids already know that they're struggling. Like, they already are very well aware of the fact that there's something different from their neurotypical peers. And so it is such a gift. I mean, I've talked to so many adults who found out as adults that their parents knew, for example, that they had ADHD, but didn't want to tell them because they didn't want them to feel this burden, right, of the label. And a lot of these adults feel that is a huge disservice because all this time they thought they were just not as smart, or they just, were not good enough, right? Not worthy enough. And so I think it's so empowering to, and I'm not saying doing this with toxic positivity and you have a superpower, but just to normalize neurodivergence because it is a normal part of being human, right?
So let's give our listeners, whether it's I know anxiety comes along with a lot of the neurodivergent challenges. So not all individuals are neurodivergent, but how do you give our listeners some examples of how you talk to an older child and a teen about this? You learn they have ADHD. You learn they have a learning disability. How do you recommend talking to them?
Yeah, I think one of the first things I would say is just, first of all, before you even talk to them about it as a parent, like, check in with yourself and give yourself time to kind of just acknowledge any feelings you might have about it that might be ableist, that might be kind of, based in fear or anxiety, like, oh my God, my kid has this going on. What does that mean? And kind of awfulizing the future potential of this child. So that would be the first thing, is kind of like, take a moment, talk to people, talk to your therapist, like, do what you need to do to kind of get to a place of like, okay, I'm feeling grounded and calm about this information. And then I think it isn't just one conversation. It's multiple conversations. It's a family culture, right? So you might start for example, if this child has a newer diagnosis, most likely they had some sort of a neuropsych assessment. So it's like, hey, we've gotten some information, and depending on the age of the child, maybe even the neuropsych would share this information. But we wanted you to know we found out some really fascinating things, and it makes sense. Some of the areas where you're struggling, we found it information, and the good news is that's going to help us kind of figure out how you can feel better in these things that are hard for you. We also found out about these incredible strengths that you have, and we want to spend a lot more time there. So I think that's, and I'll say one more thing. We can't convince our kids that, again, this is a superpower, or that they should just embrace this. Our kids also get to decide how they want to feel about their neurodivergent identity, whether or not they want to be open about it, whether or not they want to embrace it or be like, not into that. But we can just normalize it in our homes and just make it part of everyday conversation and modeling our own stuff, whether we're neurodivergent or not, modeling how we are coping. Oh, I noticed that if I don't write all of these things down, they're like out of my brain. And so I'm trying a new system, like talk out loud about that. Or I'm noticing I really struggled going to this event. I just wanted to stand in the corner. So I'm really like, do you have any ideas for how I
No,
could like
I
start
love that you're saying this. One of the things I've learned, well, I have 4 adult children, so parenting, but also through the thousands of families I've worked with, is that when we as parents meet them where they're at, we let them see our own challenges, and we're very open about it and not judgmental, eliminating you need to and you should language, but meeting them where they're at. Like, I noticed that was hard for you. When the waitress came over, like on the bridge, you were able to use a script last time, but this time you needed me as an intermediary and you weren't able to use your words. I'm thinking maybe it was loud. There was a lot going on. And you know what? It's like the first time we're at this restaurant. Let's pull out some of the things we've done in the past. ABC, preparing visuals choices. Hey, let's bring that out again. Or going to a family function and being, thinking, okay, we're going to work on some goals. We're going to do some stuff, but it got hard. You know what? We got there late. There was so much traffic. That made it hard for me too. Yeah. And I haven't seen some of these relatives in like 2 years. And whoa, my anxiety was high. Like, let them see what you go through.
Totally. So powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So share some thoughts about that, because I would love our listeners. I always find that when, we do this something called Communicamp, which I'm not sure you know how much about, but it's a 3-day intensive group treatment, but it's also an intensive parent training and support program. So it's not just 1 or 2 hours a day. It's all day with the parents, because we're offering support. We're going through scenarios. We're teaching them. We're empowering them. And they're leaving just feeling hopeful and empowered with tools. And one of the things that families will say to us is, wow, I didn't realize that. I was literally trying to direct them to this. I was telling them what they need to do. And we've created puppets sometimes instead of meeting them where they're at. How do you talk to them? And letting them be the driver in the seat, not necessarily the passenger, because then these kids feel more helpless. But it's amazing when we talk to parents and we teach them how they can kind of step back and let their child be a little bit of a driver and respect that as we guide them gently instead of telling them what they need to do, because that is not good. So
no.
Talk to me. You have a lot to say.
I was like, that does not work in my community. Like, so many of our kids really are demand avoidant, and also they might have rejection sensitive dysphoria as part of their ADHD. They might just be wired for threat. So a direction like do this or you should do this, that language you use could be really trigger them into fight or flight, right?
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
so I'm gonna give another shout out to The Self-Driven Child by Dr. Ned Johnson or by Dr. Bill Stixrud and Ned Johnson. And it's been kind of my Bible for the past 10 years, but they do such a good job of explaining why feeling a sense of control it's so important for every human. And so as early as we can, we want to give our kids a sense of agency. We want to recognize that our job is to show up as guides for these kids.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I just have to say, like, I'm sorry for interrupting, but
it's okay.
You're saying so many things during this podcast that I feel like I connect with you on so many levels. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just excited.
No, it's great. Yeah, I think that that has been the biggest game changer. And it's also just to say, like, for many of your listeners and folks in my community, it's not how we were raised, right? Like, I grew up in a household with very kind of authoritarian parents. It was like, this is what you do this, or you're going to get in
Yeah.
trouble, blah, blah, blah. And so this is a shift. But really, the more our kids can have a sense of agency over their lives, because we know that, as Dr. Ross Green says, kids do well when they can. And as my friend Ned Johnson says, our kids want their lives to work out. And if they're not working out, it's because they are stuck. And so we want to help them discover what they need to be successful and make sure they know that we feel confident in their ability to figure it out. And we're here to scaffold all the time. We're here to kind of read where they are. And if their nervous system is triggered and they need more support in going to that strange restaurant or wherever is going on, then we step in with a little more guidance. And then when they're feeling more regulated, we can step back and see where there's an opportunity for a little growth or to practice this new skill. So our job then becomes, and it feels better. It feels weird to do initially, because again, it's not how many of us were raised. But our job is to get curious about who this human is and think, okay, how can I support this kid in becoming their best self and really knowing themselves so well?
Hey listeners, we'll get back to the episode in a second. I want to tell you about Communicamp, our popular 3+ day intensive group treatment and all-day parent education and support program designed to help parents, children, and teens overcome selective mutism, social anxiety, and extreme shyness. Over 3+ action-packed days, your child or teen will engage in immersive activities guided by expert clinicians that build confidence and communication skills in a supportive, fun, and collaborative environment. Spaces are limited and spots book up fast. To learn more, please find Communicamp in this episode's description or head to communicamp.org and complete our interest form, and our team will be in touch. Let's help your child or teen find their voice at Communicamp. Let's get back to the episode.
It's interesting when you said the word stuck. I'm thinking the word avoidant too. Like, these kids become avoidant. They don't want to talk to you about it. They become almost like angry. Leave me alone. I'm never going to do it. When you have kids that are doing that, I say to the parents, you need to meet them where they're at, open up. And so when these families come for individual treatment or Communicamp, I tell the parents, like, it's either day 1 or 2, and I'll say, all right, I want you to share with your child what you learned today, and that you realize now that maybe you were asking them or saying things to them that made them feel uncomfortable, or that I didn't realize that when I was asking you to talk to Aunt Sally at the Thanksgiving dinner, what I needed to do was like talk to you about the bridge and where you were and come up with a plan together. And, maybe we needed to kind of play a game first. I realized by me asking you to talk when you may not have been ready, probably made you feel like, so you almost have to open up and just kind of be vulnerable to these kids. And when you are, the kids come forward. It's like a dance. The more they're avoidant, the more they're unwilling. You need to say to yourself, whoa, am I too far ahead and pushing and pushing? I need to come back and open the door and welcome them in by saying, whoa, I realize I might have been doing these things when I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a relationship. That's what you're describing. And a relationship is two people coming together and communicating and connecting, right? And so I think that's always what we want to focus on is connection. And especially with kids who have higher support needs, or, we're working to help them with lagging skills or with whatever's going on that's kind of getting in their way. Sometimes that can become the focus of most of our time together. And we really want to build in time that's just for fun, that's just for chilling out. We want to really foster connection with our kids, no matter how old they are or what that connection looks like. It might be, sitting next to each other on the couch while you're both on your phones. That's fine, but like helping our kids always feel safe with us. that's also going to help us be more tuned to when those windows of opportunity are. They are going to feel more trusting. And I love what you said about vulnerability. I think that's a huge part of this equation.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I have a saying, comfort and connection precede communication. And yes, connection, comfort is a reason, to connect with a peer, an area of interest. It's the same with parenting. You
Yeah.
need to connect. You need to have that loving bond, a way that you're both vulnerable. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And we're
Yeah.
teaching our children it's okay to say, I made a mistake, or it's okay that you're sad. It's okay that something frustrated you. We can't act like we're robots, because that's what our children then feel guilty for having their own feelings.
Yeah.
And most of our kids are incredibly sensitive beings. So we're taking a big part of who these wonderfully sensitive individuals are, and we're actually saying, stop being sensitive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
that's
exactly right.
terrible.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say that my kid's now 21. In the past, maybe 10 years, I've really leaned into repairing, fessing up when I massively screw up as a parent, or I made a decision I really wish I could take back. Now I'm just like, oh my God, I totally blew that. And I'm so sorry. That's not how I wanted to speak to you, or that's not how I wanted this to go down. And I will say, it felt weird when I first started doing that, but now it's just how we are. And kind of, we always grow closer after those moments, like those conversations. And then what happens next has created an even deeper bond and connection. And so, yeah.
I'm going to bring something up that has nothing to do with what we're necessarily talking about, but I feel like I'm eager to hear what you're going to say. I remember hearing so often, you shouldn't be friends with your children. And that made my blood curdle, because I have raised 4 adults. My youngest are going to be turning 30. They're twins, and then 31 and 33. And I can tell you, I've been friends with my children, but I've been their coach. I've been their mentor. And so I don't get that.
Yeah.
And so I have a feeling you don't either.
Yeah, it's interesting as you say that. It's something I haven't thought a lot about, but of course I've heard that before. 2 things come up for me. One is, I think of Dr. Ken Ginsberg's work, right? So he wrote, his most recent book is called Lighthouse Parenting. And when I had him on my podcast, he said something to me about that when we're parenting teenagers, especially, we're not parenting for now. We're parenting so that when they're 60 and we're 80, they still want to hang out with us, right?
Yeah.
We're building deep relationships with these humans. I love that. And then the second thing is, yeah, like I make a point of telling my kiddo, sometimes we'll be hanging out, just having a conversation. I'll be like, I really like you. Like, of course I love you. Like, that's a given. I love you, but I actually just really like hanging out with you, and that is really touching to my kiddo as well. And I think, it depends on how you define friends, but I think of it as somebody that I really respect and want to spend time with and I feel safe with. And if that's the definition, then absolutely.
I always say I birthed my best friends. And I feel so fortunate for that. And I remember when my little girl, who's now, actually it's Dr. Jenna, many of our listeners know, but when she was like turning 5 or 6, she was turning 6, and we were on her like hanging out, because I always had that hangout time at night with each of my kids. And she said, Mommy, if you were 6, you'd be my best friend.
Aww.
And I always remembered that. We were laying in her bed and she told me that, and we're still best friends, like,
That's so sweet.
no, I it's so real to me, because I am I feel so fortunate, and I want our listeners to know it doesn't need to be a battle.
Yeah.
There's consequences to behaviors. One of my kids took a brownie from lunch once. There were consequences for that. Didn't pay for it. Maybe it was innocent on his part, but yeah, got a detention. That wasn't something I was getting him out of. We talked about it. There's consequences to taking a brownie without paying for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or saying you're going to be home at a certain time, you pull in the range, you pull them out. But it's about parenting. And I think when you're dealing with kids that have additional challenges, it's even more important to connect with them and help them feel safe, because the world sometimes doesn't feel safe for them. And they have a hard time with kids and relationships on their own. So there's so much to talk about. I would love for you to talk about the emotional and sensory experience for many of these neurodivergent kids. I know we're going off on another topic and we don't have a ton of time, but so many of our kids are super sensitive and super emotional.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that really, if you look at autism, first of all, most or all autistic people have sensory processing differences. It's just kind of like baked into that neurotype. And ADHD and executive function challenges, those are also about like emotional regulation, right? Those are challenges there. So it's kind of baked into a lot of neurodivergence that emotional regulation and just kind of managing sensory input is challenging. And so that's just something that's really good to know. I think, even again, when my kiddo was like maybe 4 was the first kind of identification we got for some sort of diagnosis. And it was sensory processing disorder, was what it was called, SPD. And I was like, oh my gosh, this makes total sense. Right. And then we started getting more pieces of the puzzle and like figuring more out. But this is just such a part of the experience. And what I'm excited about is, the work of Dr. Stephen Porges with polyvagal theory,
Yes,
because it's
100%.
it's
I went
all
to study
related,
with
right?
him. I went and visited him and spent time just sitting with him. He is the one that taught me so much about social engagement.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? As a
Yeah.
first step in a lot of this. So I
Yeah.
thank him all the time.
He's amazing. And what he's done for our communities it's profound. And I think that is that shift in really understanding that role of nervous system regulation. I think it's connected with everything. If you're sensory overload, it's going to impact your nervous system. If you're emotionally dysregulated, it's because your nervous system is kind of activated, right? So I think that has been kind of one of the things I'm most excited about. One of the ways that I personally started reframing my parenting, which I also got from Mona Della Hook. She used this language of, what does your nervous system need right now? Not that I would ask my child that explicitly, but I would think it. If I see my kid is dysregulated, instead of me getting triggered into fight or flight and my nervous system getting activated, or me trying to like get the behavior under control, I'd be like, oh gosh, this is so curious. Your nervous system is completely activated. What does it need right now? And that took away judgment. It took away kind of meaning that I was putting onto the behavior. And it just helped me then show up for what the actual challenge was in that moment. And that's changed everything for me.
Yeah, I love that. And that leads me to thinking about the journaling. And sometimes with my older kids, they do it with their parent. They have a list of things that cause them to feel dysregulated or uncomfortable. Loud, large, lots of people environments, the 3 L's. Are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they overstimulated, understimulated? And they'll have the check off. So when I got this way, you know what? It was so loud in there. There was so many people there. It was just like, it was so big. The ceilings were so high. There was the fan in the background. It's amazing when they start to take control over and checking it off and saying, how could we do it the next time?
Yeah.
And I'll tell, I'm big with the social communication bridge, which are these 4 stages of social communication. Stage 0 being non-communicative with an individual. It's either shut down or talking to somebody they're safe with, but ignoring someone else. Nonverbal, stage 1, either responsive or initiative, using intermediaries, sounds to words, augmentative devices, stage 2, and then verbal, quiet 1 or 2 words to elaborative, initiative, and expressive. And it's okay to bridge down in a loud, large, lots of people environment. It's okay to take out the script and write it out at a new restaurant and look at the menu online so that you go prepared.
Yeah.
Because the more that they can hear the choices that a parent offers them, the more that they can see a visual, the less they need to think and process.
Yeah.
And the repetitiveness, going to the same 3 or 4 stores, the same 3 or 4 restaurants for a while to help them feel safe, to help them feel in control. It's all of these little things that add up.
Yeah.
Conversation starters, the I am and I just state. There's so many tools. It's just, the common questions, being ready for going to a, Christmas or Hanukkah dinner. What is Aunt Sally and Uncle Bill going to ask you?
Right.
Let's get ready for it in a fun game-like manner for a young child, or keeping track. I spy. Let's see who asked these questions and different
bingo
settings.
card or something. Yeah.
It's amazing. So
Yeah.
I think it's about understanding, what works for that individual and supporting them in a upbeat way rather than, oh, you really need to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you got to get into that. You need to do that. If you don't what am I paying therapy for if you're not doing it?
Right. Yeah. I love all your strategies. And I think that is what it's about. Like, we want our kids to know themselves so well that they know what they need in any given situation. I have a friend whose young adult is autistic, and it's kind of a newer diagnosis. And I love when I'm hanging out with this group and this young adult says to me, I'm going to just like go back to my room. My social battery is completely full right now. And I'm like, you do what you need to do. Thanks for letting me know, and I just that empowerment to be able to say, this is what I need right now. This is what's going on. I'm at this point and I'm about to crash. So I'm going to remove myself. So I think just helping our kids know themselves so well, and then having those strategies, the scripts, preparing in advance, all of that stuff, obviously then reduces anxiety. And I think it allows them to show up as their best selves in any environment.
Yeah, no, for sure. This has been anything but wonderful. It's just been wonderful.
Yeah.
So any tips for parents that if you had to say, all right, we just did this podcast, here is a list of some things I'd love you parents to know.
Oh, goodness. I don't know if I can put it all together, but I would just say, I think the things that I really like to share with parents is probably mirrors what you share, but that our kids are not broken. Like, they are exactly who they are meant to be. And, when I'm speaking in when someone is neurodivergent, they're always neurodivergent, right? And so the more a parent can kind of do their own work on themselves and kind of uncover what might be making them feel anxious or worried about their child, that is going to allow you to really show up for the child that you have in front of you, and then create that deeper relationship, not be parenting from a place of fear or anxiety. And that is going to help our kids feel safer and more seen. And that is what ultimately is going to help them kind of thrive and create the life that they want. So I believe in really starting with ourselves as parents in the work that I do, because we're the leader of the pack, right?
Yeah, you're the pack leader, right?
Yeah.
For sure. So share your resources with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you. So my website is called Tilt Parenting, and that is kind of the home base. And I've been doing my podcast for almost 10 years now, which is crazy pants. You can find the podcast there. I have some free resources, including one of my newer resources is called 10 Things You Need to Know. And it's 10 things that I wish I had known when I first got diagnoses for my kiddo. It's a video series. And then I have a membership community as well. And that's for parents who are really in it and they're parenting these complex kids, and they want to do it with a community of parents who are on the same journey.
Thank you so much. I know you've written books and things like that.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. I have a book called Differently Wired that it feels so old right now, but it's still, I love it so much. And it's the subtitle is, what is the subtitle? Because I changed it. A Parent's Guide to Raising a Atypical Child with Confidence and Hope. I would have used neurodivergence in there, but it wasn't being used at the time. But it's basically, it's the parent's guide to showing up for their child. It's not how to get your child to do X, Y, or Z, or how to fix your child. It's how to be the parent your child needs.
Well, thank you so much, because obviously I've read your work. I've looked at your site. So we were so honored to have you. And I love how you see the world. And I love how I realize the more that we talk today, how similar we are. And it's because you're passionate and you see it and you're aware and you're open. And that's how I feel. So thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. This has been such a fun conversation. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening to Unspoken Words, a Selective Mutism podcast hosted by me, Dr. E, and the Smart Center. This episode and all episodes of Unspoken Words is produced by New Edition Productions. Don't forget to submit any questions you have from today's episode using our Ask Dr. E form on our website. Just head to selectivemutismcenter.org/ask DRE. I'd love to answer your question in a future episode or blog post. Remember, for the best of this episode and every episode of Unspoken Words, please follow the podcast on Instagram and YouTube. We are at Unspoken Words _podcast on Instagram and Unspoken Words by DRE on YouTube. Or join our newsletter for additional SM content. We release new episodes every other Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next time.